$353 trillion. Just sit with that for a second, right? We're talking about the first quarter of 2026, and global sovereign debt just smashed through to this absolute record high. And look, we're not talking about some slow, manageable creep here. This is a massive, staggering pileup of debt that's literally rewiring the global financial landscape. It's so big, we simply don't have the luxury of looking away anymore.
So the immediate questions that should be flashing in your head right now are probably, wait, who owes all this money? And, more importantly, how on earth do we fix it before the whole system just buckles? Because literally every corner of the globe is leveraged to the hilt right now. We've got unprecedented fiscal expansion, super aggressive monetary policies, huge investments in national security. But borrowing at this kind of breakneck speed, it creates a terrifying vulnerability. If we don't figure this out, the economic fallout won't just be localized. It's going to be absolute. At the dead center of this whole crisis is, well, a $353 trillion time bomb. But there's a radically unconventional idea popping up that might actually be the exact diffusing mechanism we desperately need. We're talking about decentralized finance, specifically smart contracts. I mean, could a blockchain-based solution actually swoop in and rescue traditional, centralized economies from their own reckless borrowing habits? To figure that out, for this explainer, we first need to pinpoint exactly where all this debt is actually sitting.
And wow, the distribution of this burden is incredibly uneven. Let's look at the 2026 debt to GDP ratios. You've got the US sitting at roughly 125.8% and China at 106.9%. Now, sure, they aren't the highest numbers out there, but they're the ones that dictate the global markets, right? US Treasuries basically anchor global borrowing costs, while China's massive spending drives global trade. But then, you look at a developing nation like Sudan. They are suffocating under a massive 272% debt to GDP ratio. So for the major powers, this debt is a huge systemic risk, sure. But for emerging nations, it's immediate crippling economic paralysis.
And hey, if you're thinking, oh, it's just developing or politically volatile nations drowning in debt, get a load of this number, 1,025.8 trillion yen. That is the mind-boggling amount of domestic-heavy government bonds currently outstanding in Japan. It's wild, right? It just proves that even the absolute largest, most highly developed, tech-forward economies are leveraged to the moon. This is a truly global phenomenon. Developed markets, emerging markets, offshore centers, everyone's been drinking from the exact same fire hose of cheap liquidity. And well, now the bill is coming due.
And the impending crisis? It is very, very real. In 2026 alone, emerging markets are staring down a crushing wave of over $7 trillion in debt redemptions. Just think about that. $7 trillion of principal repayments are coming due, like right now. Imagine the insane pressure that puts on countries already struggling to just, fund basic infrastructure or keep hospitals open. When nations are forced to hemorrhage massive portions of their GDP just to service old debt, growth completely flatlines. The traditional system is literally choking these economies out.
So how do we usually handle this mess? Usually, countries have to go hat in hand for IMF standby agreements, or they get dragged into these grueling, hyper-politicized negotiations with the Paris Club. But let's be real here. These traditional debt relief strategies, they're painfully slow, they're rigid, and they get so bogged down by geopolitics. They just can't pivot fast enough when the macroeconomy shifts. But contrast that with what we're diving into today, a proposed DeFi solution called TSDCM. The whole idea is to replace that agonizing, human-bottlenecked political gridlock with clean, transparent, automated math.
Which brings us to the real meat of our explainer today, TSDCM. It stands for the Tokenized Sovereign Debt Conversion Mechanism. Okay, yes, I know that sounds like a mouthful of technical jargon, but the actual concept is an absolute game changer. It's a smart contracted instrument that lives entirely on the blockchain. And its one job, its entire purpose, is to automatically retire sovereign debt the very second a country hits specific fiscal health targets. No more begging creditors. No more decade-long debt summits. It's a math-backed, blockchain-native mechanism built to literally yank nations back from bankruptcy by making relief instant and totally tied to actual performance.
Now, obviously, sovereign debt is wildly complex, right? You can't just run this on back of the napkin math. The engine under the hood here is incredibly robust. It uses something called a two-state regime switching jump diffusion framework. Okay, don't let the scary academic jargon chase you off. All that really means is this mathematical model is constantly on the lookout for sudden, violent economic shocks. Think like a totally unexpected crash in oil prices.
It continuously tracks the country's base fiscal expansion and debt sustainability across different real-world scenarios, from a peaceful boom to a sudden crisis. It literally translates the real-world chaos of a national economy directly into a programmable, tamper-proof smart contract. So how does it actually work in practice? It uses this brilliant set of automated triggers. Let's say step 1, a struggling nation manages to get its debt-to-GDP ratio down to a strictly pre-agreed mathematical threshold. Okay, great. Then step 2, that same nation hits a target GDP growth rate, proving, hey, our economy is actually coming back to life. The absolute second those two conditions are met, boom, step 3 happens instantly. The smart contract fires. It automatically wipes out a fraction of the outstanding debt and instantly issues performance-linked tokens straight to the creditors. It's a guaranteed, finite-time activation. If the country does the hard work, the relief is mathematically guaranteed. Zero politics. None.
And you know what? This completely solves the absolute biggest headache in sovereign debt restructuring: misaligned incentives. In the old system, creditors want their cash yesterday, right? Which completely suffocates the government during a downturn and usually just ends in a default where literally everyone loses. But with TSDCM, the incentives line up perfectly. Governments get exactly what they need: instant, automatic debt relief so their economy can actually breathe and recover. And the creditors? They aren't just eating a massive loss. They get these performance-linked tokens, meaning if the country uses that breathing room to build a booming economy, the value of those tokens shoots up. The creditors only win if the country wins. It's kind of beautiful.
In fact, to quote directly from the actual mathematical research behind this framework, TSDCM promotes secondary market liquidity for sovereign claims, lowers agency costs, and offers ongoing transparency. Think about that. By hard-coding debt onto a decentralized ledger, you are completely eliminating those bloated agency costs, the armies of international lawyers, the mediators, the endless political posturing. Gone. The rules are baked in, immutable, and 100% transparent to everyone on the network from day one. It injects this incredible dynamic flexibility into sovereign debt that traditional fiat currencies and bond markets have literally never been able to pull off.
And the data? The simulated results are just staggering. When researchers actually calibrated this mechanism using real-world IMF and World Bank data and ran it through thousands of Monte Carlo simulations, it showed an expected 20 to 25% decrease in debt-to-GDP ratios over a 10-year period. A 25% drop. I mean, for a country that is just suffocating under $100 billion of debt, this isn't just a tweak. This is a massive, structurally sound lifeline. It mathematically proves that if you program flexibility into sovereign bonds, you fundamentally slash the risk of these catastrophic nation-collapsing defaults.
So it all really boils down to this. We've got a $353 trillion time bomb ticking away, and our traditional tools are just way too slow, way too rigid, and honestly, way too political to diffuse it in time. But now, we actually have the mathematical proof. We have the technological infrastructure to automate this relief and perfectly align the incentives of struggling nations and their creditors. The tech is there, the math is solid. But the absolute million-dollar, or I guess trillion-dollar question is this. Is the traditional global financial system actually brave enough to give up control and trust a decentralized blockchain with its $353 trillion problem? Let that thought sink in for a bit. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.